Some of you know that sometimes I geek out on how history interacts with business, and realizing that business is not just this common fad that's come about, Peter Drucker's the godfather of business or anything like that. Business has been going on for centuries, for millennia. And today we're going to have a conversation with Rabbi Daniel Lapin. America's Rabbi is how he's called. If you go to his website, youneedarabbi.com, youneedarabbi.com. Also want to mention a couple of the books that he'll reference later in our discussion, but I wanted to get those up front. You need to go order Thou Shalt Prosper. It's a great book. He's got a follow-up book called The Business Secrets from the Bible. Business Secrets from the Bible. But start with Thou Shalt Prosper, 10 Commandments for Making Money. You can check them out at youneedarabbi.com. Hey, right before we jump into the conversation, wanted to also let you know that our next webinar is live at bopwebinar.com. And we have recently made the decision to unlock, not sure how long we're going to do this, but unlocked our entire Business on Purpose Roadmap online coaching experience, top to bottom. The coaching calls, the content, the roadmap, everything that will take you from working in your business to working on your business step by step. You need a roadmap. You need accountability. You need those things. You'll find them if you just go to mybusinessonpurpose.com/free. That's right, 28-day free trial, completely free. No strings attached to that, and it'll give you an opportunity to be able to check that out. Enjoy this conversation that I have the privilege of being able to have with America's Rabbi, Rabbi Daniel Lapin. Rabbi Lapin, very much been looking forward to our conversation for a number of reasons, one of which is I love to think about the long tail of business and life and everything that goes into it. You've got such a deep-rooted perspective on all of those things, and I wanted to make sure that we hear from those. So, Rabbi Lapin, thank you for spending some time with us.
It's a pleasure. I've been looking forward to it. And I'd like to start off with trying to identify the 5 main characteristics of successful living, 5 main characteristics that are as true here in North America, where I live, as they would be in Africa or Asia or in South America or the Virgin Islands or the Seychelles Islands, things that are absolutely true everywhere, and also things that are true in every time. They are as true in the 21st century as they were in the 7th century when the Muslims invaded the Iberian Peninsula, and they were as true as in the 4th century when the Roman Empire began to collapse, and as true as they were many years before that when Jeremiah spoke his prophecies and when the Hebrews crossed the Red Sea on their way out of Egypt. So what are these 5 fundamental things? Well, first of all, by the way, I think of them as the 5 Fs. So in my writing, in my broadcasting, and in my books, I speak of them as the 5 Fs. The first one is family, because no matter where you live and no matter when you lived, the fact is that you exist and you have brothers and sisters, maybe, and you may have cousins, and all of that is because years ago, Grandpa and Grandma found ecstasy in one another's arms. That's it. That's why you're here. That's what family is. And it's very real. And many, many young people go through the phases of alienation from family, but thousands and thousands of therapists make very good livings listening to people who lie on their couches talking about how their families ruined their lives. But in reality, it's something we all need. And so if I talk to people who are alienated from family, I talk to them about ways in which to reconcile, because their beings as human beings need the restoration of family. It's just something we need. It's like oxygen. Now, oxygen is more urgent because without it, you start becoming stifled and asphyxiated. but the stifling and asphyxiation effect of no family is nonetheless very real. Another one is friendships. People need social friendships. That's a second one. A third one is they need their bodies. I think of it as fitness, physical fitness. If one's body is not operating properly, it's kind of hard to focus on anything else. So those are the first three F's. The fourth one is faith, which I don't want to go into now because we have limited time. And I want to go straight to the fifth one, which is finance. And again, this is fundamental for the following reasons. First of all, everybody needs to eat. It's just an inconvenient habit we all have. The second factor is that we live on a planet that is intrinsically reluctant to yield its bounty other than in the face of considerable effort. Now, today we've industrialized farming to the point where a tiny percentage of the people who live in North America are engaged in farming, and everybody else is beset not by the problem of hunger, but by the problem of obesity. But regardless of how that works, the bottom line is that everybody needs to somehow get at some of that bounty in order to live. Now, you can go beyond that. And yes, people need transport without question. And people need clothing, not only for shelter, but also for dignity. If we all worked inside a temperature-controlled bubble, we'd still want to wear clothing. So all of these things require some form of effort, because sheep don't willingly yield their fleece for woolen clothing, and ground doesn't automatically produce cotton T-shirts, and neither does it produce radishes and wheat and fruit and vegetables and everything else we need. So there's considerable effort, and that effort has to be compensated. So there we have all a need for money, because we find that we're all able to live a lot more successfully on a lot less effort if we use money and we allow specialization. If everyone became a subsistence peasant, where you made all the clothing your family needs and grew all the food your family needs and had cows for your milk and cheese, and I did exactly the same, we'd all be working 24/7. But if we allow specializations to emerge, people get better and better at things they do all the time, and it becomes feasible by means of money for you to focus on dairy products and me to focus on wheat and corn, and we buy and sell with each other. Before that, we bartered, but we discover that we're able to live a lot more successfully if we use money and allow specialization. So this goes, you don't know how far back it goes. Money is mentioned in the Bible, so I'm not aware of any period of human life where there was no money, but there were certainly parts of the world in which money was unknown, and bartering continued into the late 19th, early 20th century. But in most parts of the world, money was well known and well understood, and contributed enormously to the economic success enjoyed by Western civilization from the 16th century onwards, because it discovered money and capital markets very early for various reasons. So money and finance, the engaging in free market transactions with one another, is surely one of the oldest oldest forms of human economic interaction.
Rabbi Lapin, go back and just to summarize the 5 F's you mentioned: family, friendship, fitness, faith, and finances, or you're referring to it in the common language of money. And there's a couple of thoughts that run through my head, and I want to have a conversation about money and how it ties to effort, because what we've found in ourselves, and I'm speaking from a Western context, so we need to understand that my question's probably it is biased and it's colored one way, or at least in a perspective of ways. But when we look back at money, one of the things that we've seen, money has, I've heard plenty of people say that money's kind of it's a neutral tool. It's neither good nor evil. It's just a thing. It is what it is. And you use it for good or for evil. When it comes to effort, we've seen stories where money has kind of ramped up effort to the point that effort has crept in and corrupted families or corrupted friendships or corrupted fitness. We've also seen situations where money has come in through the conduit of effort and has built up families and built up friendships and built up fitness. It allows us certain, you mentioned margins that it gives us. Looking from your perspective, a person who owns a business, what are some of the healthy principles that a man or a woman needs when they're a business owner to properly steward that money so that money becomes a tool for something good towards their family, their friends, their fitness, and their faith, versus a tool kind of that corrupts or bastardizes those things?
Scott, the answer is twofold. First of all, anytime we focus on only one aspect and abandon balance and integrity, we're left with a bizarre distortion of the original thing. For instance, drag car racing, right? You know what drag car racing is. So if you know what a top fuel dragster looks like, it's got these tiny little wheels up front and this 25-foot long, thin, narrow body. And then at the back, you got the driver and a huge engine and massive fat tires. Now, this is not the sort of thing you want to use to take your family for a drive in the country on Saturday afternoon. It's a bizarre car. It is distorted in order to fulfill one unique and particular function. It's not a balanced vehicle. It's a very specific vehicle. If you think about the guy I once met who won a French bicycle race, he had these huge legs. I mean, his thighs were like tree trunks, but his arms were all spindly and small. And people explained to me that he's trained exclusively for bike racing. That's his whole life. So his legs are massively strong. He has adequate lung capacity, but you don't need a lot of muscles to hold the handlebars. So his upper body development has been somewhat renounced in favor of development. Again, it's good for his specialization, but it's out of balance and it's a little bit grotesque. And so if somebody makes only one of the F's, the center of his existence, namely finance, or anyone as a matter of fact, it becomes grotesque, obviously. The second point, which is even more important, is that money doesn't have to be justified. The making of money does not have to be justified because we make money, we don't take money. There are people who equate profit to piracy and plunder. And so therefore, that's why they use a terrible phrase all the time, giving back to society. Whenever a wealthy philanthropist makes a charitable gift, everybody oohs and ahs in transparent admiration. Oh, it's wonderful. Look at it, he's giving back to society. That is a fundamentally immoral perspective, because you have to think about what that tells us about what they think he was doing to society in the first place while he was making the money. So if giving charity is giving back to society, presumably making money is ripping society off. And nothing could be further from the truth. That's a huge mistake. People are always talking about how frightened they are of big business. I'm not frightened of big business. I'm very frightened of big government, because big government has the power to confiscate my hard-earned money without my permission. It has the power of force to take my money in the form of taxation. That terrifies me. But big business can only get my money if I willingly exchange my money for whatever goods and services big business provides me. If they don't provide me with anything I want, I don't deliver. I'm not a huge consumer of movies and entertainment, but the existence of those companies doesn't worry me because it's market driven, and people who want it will buy it and people who don't won't. And so we've got to understand that the only way you, and I'm talking to you and anybody listening to us, if you've got a few dollars in your pocket, I actually know exactly how you got it, provided you can assure me that you didn't hold up a little old lady and take her pocketbook, and provided you can assure me that you didn't hold up a convenience store and empty their cash register, and provided you didn't defraud any of your fellow citizens, if you didn't do any of those things, then the only way you got money in your pocket is because you pleased another human being. I don't know if it was a customer or a client or a boss or maybe a relative, but somebody gave you that money because whatever it was you did for them, they valued more than the money they gave you. There's nobody you have to apologize for doing that. And so when we understand what making money is all about, we realize that the money itself is evidence of good behavior, serving another human being. Crucially important, and it lies at the heart of why the people of Israel have always been disproportionately good at making money. And that's the topic of two of my important books. I think they're important. So do nearly 1 million other people. But that is hugely important. If you can't wrap your head around the idea that making money is essentially moral and dignified, then any decent person will be fatally handicapped in the process, because nobody who's a decent human being succeeds well at something that deep in his heart he considers to be morally reprehensible. And so if you don't understand that making money is moral and dignified, you're just never going to really be very good at it.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like we need to dive into that a little bit, because this is not only do I speak from a Western context, but I speak from a Western, I'll call it, even though I don't like to be brushed with this, I'll call it from a Western evangelical context. And so with that, there comes this inherent, and full disclosure, I actually pastored an evangelical church. And so with that being said, you can imagine.
Well, I'm not going to talk to any bigoted Christian. That's it. We're done with this interview.
So the problem is, Rabbi, is we're still coded with this mindset. And when I came into business, our mutual friend Dan Miller, he told me, I will never forget this. He said, Scott, you are going to have to break out of your mindset of the mindset of a pastor when it comes to running a business. And he said, because you can't give your stuff away for free everywhere.
Let me suggest a better way to do that. And I know and love Dan Miller. We've been friends for years. But instead of getting out of your pastor mindset to get into business, I'd rather you brought your business mindset into the church and into pastoring.
Explain that a little bit.
Well, one of the great things about being in business is that you always know whether you are performing well or poorly. It's a little bit like being Usain Bolt at the 2012 London Olympics. When he got through the 100-meter tape in 9 seconds, about 9 seconds, and Olympics are measured to the thousandth of a second, but roughly, there's nobody on earth who could have tapped Usain Bolt on the shoulder and said, by the way, Usain, you're a bit of a faker. You call yourself an athlete, but I don't think you really are. Usain Bolt would laugh him off because the clock proved. But unfortunately, there are a lot of activities that are not like that. One of them is pastoring. It's not the only one, but there are plenty. How do we determine? How does the world objectively determine whether you are a good pastor or I'm a good rabbi? It's terrible. There's no good way. How many people listen to your sermon? You're going to measure which ones listen, which ones sleep? How many people in the church like you? Well, maybe if they like you too much, you're not really doing your job. So how do we measure your success as a pastor or a rabbi? But one of the great things about business is there's a thing called the bottom line. And that's like winning the 100 meters in 9 seconds. Because if your bottom line is in the black, you're doing pretty darn well. But if your bottom line is unfortunately in the red, you're in bad shape. And you know it. And there's no getting around it. And you cannot even fool yourself, which is really important. So that's what I meant when I say take some business principles into the church with you. Make sure that, number one, you are customer focused. Are you supplying what the customers really need? That's a really important question. And number two, if you are, then people are usually very comfortable paying for what they receive when they receive value. And the evidence of this is that there are many travel vlogs on YouTube where there is no compulsion on the part of the viewer, and yet huge numbers of viewers go along to Patreon and make a gift to the creator of the video. Why? Because most of us, when we receive something of value, are comfortable handing over some money to the creator. And this was rooted, again, in early constitutional and legal thinking for the United States of America. The whole idea of patent law was to make sure that people who worked hard to come up with a helpful idea got adequately compensated. And in the same spirit, then, I would say that if the collections, and I know it's voluntary, and I think that's beautiful and wonderful, but if the love offerings do not reach something that is a comparable figure for other churches of your kind, then I'd say, okay, something isn't right here. These are what I mean. It's just a few examples of many more of ways in which authentic and universal principles of finance can and should be used in the church.
Mm. Rabbi, you mentioned
Ken and I haven't actually ever talked about that part of
it. You mentioned earlier about Jewish business people are notoriously successful historically in business. We've got a number of business owners who listen. Some have struggled. They've been in that red space or are in that red space. Many are in that black space, and they've done pretty well. And they've built up reserves over time. From your perspective, in order to stay in that balanced scenario, so the non-distorted scenario, what does a business owner do when they're in that place of let's just call it excess or margin? Their barns are full and things are going really, really well. What have you found historically that has been a really healthy way to live out your finances when you're flush?
I'm afraid that there is no difference. And this is a difficult thing. Very often it's a difficult thing for religious Jews and Christians to deal with, because we all feel, and we're not correct on this, but we feel that somewhere in the back of our religious structure, somewhere in the back of our matrix of faith and biblical belief, somewhere there's got to be something that says, you know what, when you got enough, you got enough. That's all there is. Don't have more for it. The only problem with that is that there actually isn't anything like that. And there's a reason for that, because enough is very difficult to define. Let me explain what I'm saying. One has to be constantly focused on the 5 F's. You're taking care of your business. You've also got to be taking care of your family. You've got to be taking care of your friendships. You've got to be focused on your faith. And you've got to be focused on physical health as well. These things are all very important. They all help you maintain balance. But what we will all realize sooner or later is that there is nothing static in nature. Nothing in the world is static, right? A rose bush is either growing towards full bloom or it's declining and it's on its way down. In the spring, trees are sprouting leaves and blossoms and flowers, and in the fall, they're losing them. There is a constant move, and it's really important to understand that a business is a spiritual entity. It's an organic entity, and as such, it's either growing or shrinking. And so there really is no time to stop growing your business. Now, if you go back to what I said a little bit earlier, which is that making money is God's way of incentivizing us to do good for other people, then you'll realize why there is no word for retirement in the Bible. You'd think that's something so fundamental. When a person reaches a certain age, hey, take it easy, go play golf, retire. No such word for that in the Lord's language. In the Hebrew Bible, no word for retirement because it's immoral. You're not in this to get enough for you. You're in this to serve your other fellow human beings, God's other children. And so imagine how I feel when I knock on the door of my accountant on April the 14th, and I say, I'm here with my papers. We got to get my tax return in. And he says, oh, didn't you know I'm retired? What? He says, yeah, I made enough money. I can live the rest of my life without working. How dare you? What sort of terrible human being are you? All these years you took care of me, and now, because you got enough, you're taking your ball and going home. It's outrageous. Where did you suddenly acquire an exemption from having to take care of me? It's nonsense. And so there is no magical day in business at which you're supposed to say, okay, done enough of this, I'll do some other thing. No, that's complete nonsense. There is no such thing. You constantly try and build your business, which means you're taking care of more and more of God's other children. You are acquiring more and more assets and wealth, and that's wonderful. That's a huge blessing.
Wow. So that's it's a little counterintuitive to much of the Western Christian teaching and some of the things that are going on. I know that there's a recent book, God and Money. Have you had a chance to read that yet?
Who's it by?
I'd have to go back and remember the author.
Doesn't matter. No, the bottom line is I haven't anyway.
Yeah. I'll give you a link to that later on. But there is there's a principle in there where basically, and again, I'm paraphrasing, and obviously you have to go read the book, but they mention in there that each year a family sets a ceiling and saying this is what we'll live on, is this ceiling. Let's call it 150,000 US a year or something like that. And everything we make over that we'll give away. And so I know that there's some progressive concepts being taught and shared, but the money part of this, I no doubt, is going to have a lot of people asking questions, especially what you talked about, the idea of enough being enough, and there really is no way to define how enough is enough. And
then now might be a good time to reference the names of my books, because
let's do that.
Even if we spoke for another hour, which we cannot do, I would not be able to cover the entire topic in its entirety. That I do in my books. One of them is called Thou Shalt Prosper, the 10 Commandments for Making Money. And the other is called Business Secrets from the Bible. And there is also a 10-part video training program called the Financial Prosperity Collection. All of this at my website, which is youneedarabbi.com.
So let's talk. I read Thou Shalt Prosper. It was probably 5 years ago or so when I was able to go through it. If you were to boil down for people who are listening as they go through those 10 commandments that you have laid out for Thou Shalt Prosper, what's the end game for you? What are you hoping that when somebody reads through that they'll get to the end of the book and go, okay, this is the transformation that I want to see happen?
Yeah, I want to live in a society of financially successful people. You know, whether I'm a plumber or a bookkeeper or a ballerina or a proctologist, or a gardener, I will live better if I live in a community of prosperous people. If I live in a people of subsistence peasants, then they'll all do their own work. They'll mow their own lawn and do their own gardens and fix their own faucets and do everything for themselves because they can't afford to have anyone else do it. So my goal is to increase prosperity in my community. That's good for everybody. And it's particularly good for people in ministry, because nobody listens to broke people, do they?
Yeah. Fascinating. Now, the business secrets from the Bible, same goal for you when somebody reads through that book?
Oh, it's just an elaborate. It just takes us a little further. It makes no difference which one you read first.
Yeah, that's great. Final question for you, Rabbi, and this is as you look back historically, through all of Jewish literature, through Jewish culture. If you could boil down, because I want to go back to that phrase that you mentioned, that Jewish business people really are notoriously well-versed at business. If you could just kind of bring that down into summation, I know you walk through this in your books, but just in kind of a snippet form, if that's possible, why is that? Why are Jewish businessmen and women more prone to see success in business?
It's very important in life to be able to resist temptation. Food, sex, all kinds of things. Well, one of the most tempting of temptations is when somebody says to me, so could you drill down through 10 years of research and about 300,000 words of printed material, and what is the one most important facet? And you're not alone in committing this crime, Scott. Everybody does it. I'm at events, family speaking events, and I finish my speech, and somebody comes up to me and says, so what is the single most important thing in building a successful marriage? People all the time say, okay, so what is the one thing I really got to get clear if I want to improve my revenue, if I want to increase my income? This is like my BMW mechanic coming up, and I say to him, hey, Fritz, just tell me, what's the one thing I got to remember about taking care of this car? Doesn't work that way.
Sure.
Life is much too complicated to be reduced to simple slogans. At the very least, think about the soldier being deployed, leaving his sweetheart behind. And she says to him, don't worry, honey, absence makes the heart grow fonder. And he, all happy, he gets on the plane to Afghanistan, and he's sitting next to another soldier who says, so, how are you doing? He says, well, I'm sad to leave my girlfriend behind. And the soldier wiggles his eyebrows and he says, ha, 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 out of sight, out of mind. Well, which is it? Absence makes the heart grow fonder, or out of sight, out of mind? Which is true? And the answer is life is too complex for slogans. It doesn't work that way. All of which is by way of trying to respond to you as politely and as lovingly as I possibly can, and saying, no, I'm afraid that is not something I can do. This is a hugely complex area. It's an area in which I possess, as a result of my heritage, a vast body of ancient Jewish wisdom that I have laboriously, over more than 10 years, condensed into many, many, many specific strategies and tools that have to be implemented. And in my books and in my video materials, I take people on a journey to get there. But the notion that I can just, wave a magic wand and, well, there's only one thing you got to remember, and you're going to look, that's not how the world really works. And I'm right.
Sure. Well, thank you for that, Rabbi Lapin. Make sure to go check out his two books he mentioned, Thou Shalt Prosper, those 10 commandments he lays out, and also the business secrets from the Bible.
The website is youneedarabbi.com.
Yep. So the video collection as well, Financial Prosperity Collection, and then what he just mentioned, youneedarabbi.com. Go check that as well. Rabbi Lapin, thank you so much for the time.
Pleasure talking with you, Scott. Best wishes.
Thank you. Did you not love the restraint there at the end when I asked him to kind of boil things down? And that wasn't a test. I wasn't planning on that. I did like, though, how he stuck to his values and saying, no, it's much broader than this, and we're not able to do that. And I appreciated that and how he laid that out. So a couple of different things, those 5 main characteristics, the 5 F's, family, friendship, fitness, faith, and finances. Make sure to go check out his book, Thou Shalt Prosper, the 10 Commandments for Making Money, and the follow-up book, Business Secrets from the Bible, and his website, youneedarabbi.com. Hey, if you're busy in the weeds, wearing too many hats, working in your business, let's get you out of that. Head on over to mybusinessonpurpose.com/free, where for a period of time we have completely unlocked unrestrained access to our entire Business on Purpose coaching roadmap, and it'll help give you the time back for what matters most, talking about those 5 F's, right? We want you to have more time for your family, your friendships, fitness, faith, and finance. You can't do that if you're head down in the business all day long. We've got to get you some margin around that. mybusinessonpurpose.com/free. While you're at it, if you don't mind, write a 5-star review. Give us a rating and review on this podcast and subscribe to it. It's free. And that way you'll be updated every time we have either a monologue conversation or a dialogue like we had today with Rabbi Daniel Lapin. We'll see you next time right here on the Business on Purpose podcast.